heart strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea. Daily walking close to thee. Let it be.
14 and verse 43, immediately. This is a time marker. They're in the prayer, in the garden praying. It's at night. It's late at night. And immediately, while he was still speaking. So this event coincides with what we just finished talking about last week. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the scribes and the elders. So the Jewish leaders show up with clubs and swords to arrest a man who the most violent thing he ever did was turn a table over. Now the betrayer had given them a sign saying, the one I will kiss is the man. Seize him and lead him away under guard. I find it interesting the way this is put. It's very clear that this is Judas's sign, that he's the one that tells them, this is how I'm going to do this. And generally, what is a kiss a demonstration of? Affection, familiarity, fellowship, association. Why would he choose that? Just seems odd, but that's what he chooses. When he came, he went up to him at once and said, Rabbi, and he kissed him. And they laid hands on him and seized him, but one of those who stood by drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. We do have in other accounts the names given. Who's involved in that affair? Peter and who's the servant? Anybody remember his name? Malchus is his name. And so these are real people, real events, real things that happen. There's a lot of interesting little tertiary pieces of information that we get from this. Peter obviously carried a sword. And in fact, not long ago, I think it was in Mark's gospel, I think this event is, we read about him telling his disciples, go sell your things. If you don't have one, and get a sword. And they produced how many? Out of the 12 of them, they produced 2. And he said, it's enough. This was not a case where these were pacifists that didn't seek to protect themselves or their lives. Peter's not only carrying, but what's he willing to do? He's willing to use it. I don't know how good a swordsman he was. I don't know if he cut off the ear trying to lop off the guy's head and just missed, or if he swung the sword and the guy dodged, or if he intentionally didn't do anything but cut off an ear. That seems like a weird thing to try to cut off. But at any rate, that's what happens here. And gee, by the way, if I was writing this story, he wouldn't have probably cut off his ear. It would have been something much more dramatic than that.
Unusual that he wasn't arrested?
Well, yeah, it would seem to be unusual for several reasons. One, we're told this is the servant of who? Of the high priest. To attack his house is to attack him. Secondly, they were armed. So why wouldn't they go after the one who's actually actively fighting against them? But they don't. It's Jesus. It's Jesus they want. They're there for a purpose. And they have one thing in mind, which also, I'm glad you bring that up because I actually hadn't thought about this, but it made me think about this. what else is going to take place here over the next hour or two? There's going to be people who say to Peter, you were with him, and Peter's going to say what? Not me. Now, presumably, he was denying him to do what? To not be associated with him, not be drawn in with him into this predicament. If they were going to pull Peter into the predicament, this is where it would happen. So we see that the denials that come throughout the rest of the night actually indicate an increasing paranoia on Peter's part. At this stage, at this hour, he's actually willing to go through with, if I have to die with you, I'll die with you. He's fighting.
Judas knew he was doing that. Maybe he was told he would.
I think Judas knew exactly what was going to happen to Jesus. And it's made clear in the Gospel of Mark that Judas was the one who was pushing this as far as the process to get him delivered over. We know what they were wanting to do with Jesus, and then we see Judas going out of his way, making plans, and providing leadership in this process of turning him over. So, yeah, I think that Judas knew exactly what was going on. The process of how it was done was his idea. That it would be done was his idea. The only thing that wasn't his idea was what? But based on what we've read in Mark's gospel, it appears that the payment of money was an offer on their part to him. He came and said, this is what I'll do. And they said, well, we'll give you some money. Now, he didn't turn it down. Why didn't he turn it down? Because he's greedy. Same reason he stole from the treasury.
I just wonder why it all took place the way it did. I mean, this is God's word, and he did it for a reason. But those that went to arrest Jesus knew who he was. They didn't need to.
Yeah, but they hated him. They wanted to get rid of him. They didn't need the weapons. Not real sure why they came with, and in fact, Jesus is not real sure about that either. He raises that question. Does Mark cover that? I don't think it's Mark that covers that. So I can just interject this. At one point, he actually said to them, look, I was with you just earlier today in the temple. You could have taken me any time you wanted me. Why do you come out here in the middle of the night with clubs and swords, as if I'm some kind of violent criminal? Yes, ma'am.
The kiss Jesus. I think there was a calmer way, like to arrest him, to get him, arrested, because if it was any other way, it would have been a riot, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it made it clear that that one of his inside group was involved in the process. But it's just interesting for someone to voluntarily choose to use an act of what? Love? An act of affection as a means to betray. It just is kind of, to pull from the play Julius Caesar, the fact that Brutus stabbed Caesar was a shocking thing to the character of Caesar. Et tu, Brute, is the famous line from that, which means, you too, Brutus? Where did Brutus stab Caesar in that play? Yeah. He came up to him and embraced him and stabbed him. I think Shakespeare borrowed that from this. But the point is this, that the shock of using a display of love and affection as a means to intentionally deliver someone to people that they know want to have them killed, that's a particularly heinous thing to do, a particularly cold thing to do. Right. Right. That's a good observation. But it didn't work with Peter because Peter was pretty rash. So he draws his sword out and goes to whacking. And then it says, Jesus said, by the way, the other part is left out. Mark is always succinct. He leaves out the part that Jesus actually put Malchus' ear back on. Jesus said to them, have you come out against a robber? Look, there it is, the very next verse. I said I wasn't sure if Mark covered this part or not, but there it is. Have you come out against us as a robber with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I was with you in the temple teaching you, did not seize me, but let the scriptures be fulfilled. And they all left him and fled. Now what's he talking about, but let the scriptures be fulfilled? You ever given any thought to that? Obviously, the grand arc of let the scriptures be fulfilled is arrest me, try me, put me on the cross, and kill me. That's what's supposed to happen. But I think there's something more specific than that in mind here. Yeah, there's that prophecy, and then there's another one that's just simply a phrase in the midst of another one that says he was numbered with the transgressors. Have you come out with me as if I'm a robber? Yes, that's exactly how they came after him. And that's how they crucified him. He was between two thieves. Yes, ma'am. Yep, I think at that point that's what he meant. Then he later actually told them, especially Peter, that Peter would follow him there. That eventually they would actually forfeit their life to walk with God. But yes, that's a good observation. And so as he said, let the scriptures be fulfilled, what he's basically offering a protest. Look, I've been with you day after day after day. And at any time you could have taken me. Why are you coming out here? And the point he's making is not to try to argue and get them to change their mind. That's not what he's trying to do. He's actually trying to teach them and to say, look, I know your motives. I know what you're doing here. I know that this isn't an organic happening thing that's a response to some particular thing. This is a plot. There's a reason why you're here in the middle of the night. Why do people do things in the middle of the night? So no one sees it. Why didn't they arrest Jesus in the middle of the temple when he was doing some of the things that he did? Why didn't Pilate initially want to do why? There's several times that it says they didn't do anything for fear of the people, of the crowds. That there were people out there that had they known what was going on would have done what? They would have protested. So to avoid the protest, what do? You do it under cover of night, so that fewer people see it. It also can potentially give you deniability. If the rumor starts going around in the early morning and you're not ready for people to know, then you can say, I don't know what they're talking about. And people weren't up to see it. Nobody took pictures back in those days. Yes, sir.
They always in time when they knew they had enough people that supported them. I mean, it all comes back to the same thing that exists today. The way for evil to succeed is not so much for bad people to do bad things, but for good people to sit by and do nothing. That's the same thing then, it would be that way.
Right, and that's eventually where this goes. This is eventually done in the middle of the day, and the masses are persuaded. But there's a process. And they didn't want to start at that point. But he's just simply saying, look, I know what's going on. And this is overkill. I don't want to use contemporary events because I don't want to draw So I'm going to create a hypothetical event. It is tantamount to you taking a piece of bubble gum from the store, and they show up to arrest you for doing that with a fleet of police cars and everyone in SWAT gear and a no-knock warrant being executed on your house so they can come in and get you and drag you out of your bed. Now, how foolish would that be? Why would they need to come after someone that had done nothing with the SWAT team? And that's effectively what they did here. And that's what he's pointing out. This is you're not doing something noble. You're doing something wrong, and you know it. You know it's wrong, or you wouldn't be doing it in the middle of the night. Then he says, but let the scriptures be fulfilled. I'm not going to stop it. Could he have stopped it? Absolutely. But he didn't, because the scriptures needed to be fulfilled. And they left him and fled. That is, his disciples left him and fled. And a young man followed him with nothing but a linen cloth about his body. And they seized him, but he left the linen cloth and ran away naked. All right, I don't know who this young man is. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now, there's all kind of scholars that speculate that it was Mark himself. There's nothing in here that tells me that is who it was. Why is this little piece of information in here? By the way, it's not in any of the other Gospels. That's one of the reasons why they speculate that it's Mark. But why is this piece of information in here? Why are we told about this young man who's wrapped in a linen cloth, and they came and they grabbed him and he ran away? First off, note that it is following the statement that they all fled. Okay, he had told them earlier in the night that that was going to happen, and all of the disciples, it started getting hot. And trouble was brewing, and people were actually having hands laid on them, and arrests were being made. And what do people do when you got a band of criminals and they go out and they're committing some crime and the police show up? What happens? They scatter. That's exactly what's happening here. Now, they haven't done anything wrong, but they don't want to be there to be arrested. And if they're focused on Jesus, I can get away. And that's what happens. But here's this young man who's out there. He's wrapped in nothing but a linen cloth. And they seized him. So now it's actually happening. Now it's spreading around to the other people who are standing there. People are laying hands on people just for being there around Jesus. How desperate is he to get away? You don't run out of your clothes and run around naked by choice. You do that to get out of a situation that you're terrified of. And so that's the extent to which, and I think what we need to understand is the circumstances and the pressure and the heated nature of this exchange. This was not a calm thing. They didn't just walk up quietly and say, we're here to arrest you, and Jesus go, oh, okay, I'll go with you. And everybody's cordial and treating one another properly, and that's not what's going on here. There's some mayhem and reason for terror. You don't run out of your clothes unless you're trying to save your life. That's why you run out of your clothes. So that's how desperate the situation was. But you know what Jesus didn't do? He didn't try to run away. He actually had the boldness to say, what, I've been with you day after day after day in broad daylight. I've been available to you at any time. You didn't do anything to me, but here you come out in the middle of the night like I'm some kind of thief or robber with swords and clubs to arrest me. But you know what? Let it be. And he stood there and let them arrest him, when he actually is the one who had the power to stop it all. There's the real picture. The contrast between those whose spirit was willing but their flesh was weak, and the one who willingly submitted. Now we know that this isn't willful on Jesus' part. He didn't have a death wish. But he understood, and he said, you know what? This is the will of the Father. At one point, I think it's John actually records him making this statement. What should I pray? Father, deliver me from this hour. It is for this purpose I have come to this hour. Expressing what? I'm not going to ask God to not make me go through this when this is the reason I'm here. In other words, he willingly submitted to the will of the Father. That's the picture that's being portrayed here. And the contrast between one who would run out of their clothes to avoid what was about to happen and one who willingly stayed. Knowing what was about to happen, I would be screaming, this is unjust and this is unfair and you can't do this to me. And he was saying what? But let the scriptures be fulfilled. That sets a pretty high bar for being Christ-like, doesn't it? They led Jesus to the high priest. All the chief priests and the elders and the scribes came together, and Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards and warming himself at the fire. He's sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. In other words, he's trying to do what? He's trying to blend in with the people who have all the power and authority. Chief priests and the whole council were seeking testimony against Jesus to put him to death. What's that mean, seeking counsel against Jesus or testimony against Jesus? Okay, they wanted to put him on trial, but they needed witnesses of something, so they're actually actively seeking people who will come and testify against him. But they found none. Okay, so they want to put him on trial. They want to have some pretense of being just, but they can't find anyone to give any testimony that he's done anything wrong. Well, there's several aspects of this. Yeah. The principle at play particularly is you had to have 2 or 3 witnesses against someone to confirm a matter, and they had how many? None. So this is a problem. How are we going to address this problem? You know what should have happened at this stage? If justice was what this was about, what should have happened immediately? There are no witnesses, release him. But that's not what happens. Many bore false witness against him. There are people who are talking, but what is apparent to everyone? That they're lying. Why? Many bore false witness against him, but their testimony did not agree. They couldn't get 2 or 3 people who would tell the same lie. That ought to tell you something about the life of Jesus. I'm pretty sure if I wanted to railroad someone, if I asked around and talked to enough people, I could find 2 or 3 people to say the same thing about you. They couldn't do that. It wasn't a lack of people willing to testify. It was the fact that their testimony was so blatantly false that even these people couldn't ignore it. We heard him say, I will destroy the temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I'll build another not made with hands. That's what they finally bore witness against him over. That's what it says in verse 50. Some stood up and bore false witness against him, saying, we heard him say, no, that's not exactly what he said. In fact, we're told in the context what he meant when he said, I'll tear it down and raise it up in 3 days again. He was talking about what? His body, not that temple made with hands. Yet even about this, their testimony did not agree. And the high priest stood up in the midst and asked Jesus, have you no answer to make? Now, any good attorney in a U.S. court would respond to that question how? Anybody know? No, I have no answer to make. You don't have a case. There's been no accusation. There's been no testimony given against me. The testimony speaks for itself. It's clear. This is all made up. Why are they asking him to make a defense? By the way, the people that designed our court systems are really smart guys, and they also were familiar with the Bible. There's a reason why there is a protection in our courts that says you don't have to testify against yourself. And in a criminal court, you don't have to testify at all. You don't have to say a thing, because the burden is placed upon the state to prove that you've done something, and you don't have to prove anything. Why were they wanting Jesus to offer an answer? Because there was no validity to the testimony, but if he tried to refute it, there's the appearance that there's some substance there. Have you no answer to make? What is it that these men testify against you? He remained silent and made no answer, which is exactly what he should have done. There was no answer to make. There was no testimony against him, no charges against him that were truthful or believable or reliable. Again, the high priest asked him, are you the Christ, the Son of the Blessed? And Jesus said, I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power and coming with the clouds of heaven. By the way, here's an interesting little lesson here. You will see. That means that had to happen when? In his lifetime. He doesn't say this is going to happen at some point thousands of years from now. He said, you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power. You'll see me in my kingdom. That's really they're asking him, are you a king? And his answer is what? Yes, and you're going to see it. And the high priest tore his garment. Why did he do that?
He had just committed blasphemy.
Okay. And that is what he goes on to say. What further witness do we need? Yeah, it was not presuming he was in his official garb, which I doubt very seriously was the case. It is right. It was out of frustration and anger. And his response is, what further witnesses do we need? You've heard his blasphemy. What is your decision? And they all condemned him as deserving death. And some began to spit on him and to cover his face and to strike him, saying, prophesy. And the guards received him with blows. Yes, sir.
This is show that, I mean, I think it's a pretty good example of the fact that the scripture needed to be followed. Because in the old Jewish law, they wouldn't have needed somebody else to put it to death. After he committed blasphemy, they'd have stoned him.
Well, that would have been the appropriate Jewish thing to do, but see, they're playing both sides against the middle. They're going to be worried about the Romans and what's going to happen to them too. They're not just trying to carry out the law of God. Now, this is an important thing. I'm glad you brought that up, because I probably wouldn't have talked about this either. If they were sincerely trying to carry out the will of God and walk in righteousness, it would not have mattered. They would have done exactly what they thought needed to be done. Proof in point, and what you'll hear people say from a lot, well, you know, they didn't have the authority and the Jews wouldn't let, but you know what? When they got mad at Stephen and thought Stephen blasphemed, what'd they do to Stephen? They stoned him right then and there. It's not that they were not willing to do that to someone. They wanted the cover of believability, acceptability. Look, even the Romans, we didn't do it, the Romans did it. He was crucified. We don't crucify.
They didn't want it blood on
Why not?
I think it's just me, it's not
Yeah.
the scripture. I think that they had seen enough of what he had done throughout his life to realize that there was some legitimacy to it.
They saw his miracles and couldn't deny that he was working miracles. And the argument was made to him on more than one occasion, if God is with someone, how can you deny what they're saying? He had a great following among the people. And I think they could do the exact same thing Pilate did. Pilate was not some kind of magical guy that had a gift to see the truth when all these other people didn't. They could have come to the exact same conclusion that Pilate came to, which was what? There's no fault in this man. They knew that it was contrived. They were the ones who were trying to pay people to testify against him. They knew that it was a contrived charge. But again, they want it to look legitimate. So now we have legitimate cover. Under Jewish law, he's blasphemed. Okay, prove that he's blasphemed. Well, they don't have to do that. They just accept that. But then notice how he's treated. They all say he's deserving of death. And then people begin to spit on him and to cover his face and strike him. And it says that the guards received him with blows. What does that mean, the guards received him with blows? They didn't just, he was there. He was under arrest. He was already under their control, but yet they still came to him. The guards surrounded him and received him, took hold of him, took control of him by beating him down. All they would have had to do is do what? Take him by the arm and lead him where they wanted him to go. But that's not what they did. What'd they do? They beat him and spit on him and tried to show him that he was completely unworthy of respect. That's why you spit on people. To show your disdain and lack of respect. And that's what they did to our Lord. And I'm going to tell you something. The ability to stand there and let it happen when you have the power to stop it, that's what self-discipline looks like. I got to stop. We'll pick up in verse 66 next time. I said I was going to get out of chapter 14, didn't quite do it. I appreciate all the comments this morning. I enjoy that. That's what makes classes good. Brought out several things that I probably would not have talked about. So I encourage you to continue that as time goes on.
heart strong. Jesus, keep me from all wrong. I'll be satisfied as long as I walk, dear Lord, close to thee. Just a closer walk with thee. Grant it, Jesus, is my plea.